Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a really different kind of journey, not to space itself exactly, but into the incredibly intense process of becoming a NASA astronaut.
Yeah, we're digging into this amazing personal account. It covers someone's selection, their first flight on Discovery, that really critical mission to fix Hubble.
And it's from the perspective of someone who, felt they were stepping into an above-average role, as they put it.
Exactly. So this isn't just rockets and simulators, though there's plenty of that. It's about the sheer dedication, the huge amount of learning, and maybe the surprising human side of it all. The social stuff, the pressure.
Absolutely. Forget the shiny photos for a minute. We're looking at the real deal. Like moving to Houston, July 96, chosen as an astronaut candidate in NASCAN.
Right.
But what really jumped out at me was this feeling, even after getting picked, that you're still auditioning. Like, constantly.
That's a great point. Selection's just the first hurdle, isn't it? The account really shows that drive to impress, Especially in that huge ASCAN class, 44 people, 35 American, 9 international. There must have been this underlying, competition.
You'd think so.
Mm.
How do you balance wanting to stand out with needing to be a perfect team player? That's tricky.
Very. And it starts right away. Imagine showing up to a party before day one, meeting all these people from all over.
Yeah, there's that little anecdote about meeting Julie Payette, the Canadian ASCAN. She apparently wanted to make it clear she wasn't just there because of her husband, establishing her own identity right from the start.
And those early connections, those dynamics, they're probably more important than they seem at first.
Sure. Building trust.
Yeah, because you're going to rely on these people. I mean, really rely on them. And sharing an office with Pat Forrester, Payette, Peggy Whitson, Stephanie Wilson.
Oh.
Wow. That's some serious brain power in one room.
No kidding. But the social side quickly shifts to just intense learning, right?
Oh, massively. The classroom stuff sounds like getting multiple degrees at once. Geology, meteorology, physics, aerodynamics, NASA history.
Plus learning the T-38 jet.
Right. But the big one, the really deep dive, was the space shuttle itself.
And not just knowing the buttons.
No. Understanding how it was designed, system by system, how it works normally, what happens when it doesn't work, and crucially, what you do about it. Emergency procedures.
It's about preparation for, anything.
Exactly, which is where the shuttle mission simulator, the SMS, comes in. That thing was key.
How so?
It basically tied everything together. You didn't just learn about the cooling system in a book, you experienced what happens when it fails during, say, post-insertion, and how that affects other systems, from pre-launch all the way to landing.
Okay, so post-insertion.
Mm-hmm.
That's right after you get into orbit.
Yeah, that switch from being on a rocket to actually flying a spaceship. You've got to reconfigure computers, open the payload bay doors for cooling.
Radiators, basically.
Right. Deploy the big Ku-band antenna that's your main link to Earth for comms and data. Deploy the robot arm. It's this whole complex sequence. One thing wrong can cascade.
And the ascent training, that sounded brutal, even though they said the crew is kind of passive during a normal launch.
Well, passive is relative. You're monitoring everything. But the training focus was on malfunctions. What if this fails? What if that explodes? They had to be ready for, honestly, just about any nightmare scenario you could imagine.
Expect the unexpected. Squared.
That's the philosophy. Then you get into orbit ops. Deploying payloads, retrieving them, practicing rendezvous and docking.
With Mir, initially, right? ISS wasn't up yet.
Correct. So they were practicing linking up with Mir. Talk about precision flying, a tiny adjustments, perfect timing.
And then coming home, deorbit prep.
Also super complex, stowing everything antenna, arm, closing the payload bay doors securely, reconfiguring the computers again for re-entry, then the deorbit burn itself.
And re-entry and landing. Pilots really earned their keep there, I gather.
Oh, yeah. The account has this pretty vivid story about the first re-entry sim.
The one that went badly.
Yeah. Multiple screw-ups. Started the APUs, the auxiliary power units, wrong. Those are critical for hydraulic power. Missed procedures. And then basically crashed the simulated landing.
Ouch. Bet the feedback was gentle.
Slight chuckle. Not exactly. Direct and to the point, apparently. But it hammered home the complexity.
How complex are we talking?
Just go think about it. Over 2,000 switches and controls in the cockpit. 1 million parts in the whole vehicle. Countless ways to mess up if you're not absolutely meticulous.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot.
It really drives home why the training is compared to getting a PhD. The workload sounds immense.
Classes, sims, studying at night, reviewing on weekends. Making your own training notebook. It's relentless.
It had to be. But it wasn't just shuttle-focused either.
Right. The field trips.
Yeah.
Ames, Glenn, Goddard, Michaud, all the different NASA centers.
Yeah, understanding what everyone does, how a project comes together across the whole agency, because astronauts are, the public face.
They need to be able to talk about the whole mission, not just their part.
Exactly, and build relationships with the people actually building and managing things on the ground. It's all interconnected.
There was also that bit about the ASCAN class dynamics, asking tons of questions.
Yeah, apparently their class got a bit of a reputation for it. Trying to impress management, show they were digging deep. It was competitive, remember? They all wanted flight assignments.
Which leads to that funny story about C.J. Sturkow.
Oh, right, warning them not to ask too many questions before a trip to Ames. Maybe a bit dramatically.
Chuckles. A little bit of astronaut office politics, maybe.
Probably. But then they got assigned specific roles, right? Focused on particular shuttle systems.
Yeah, like becoming the office expert on, say, the life support system, participating in design reviews, representing the crew perspective.
Our source got assigned to the caution and warning system, but for the space station, which didn't really exist yet.
So kind of looking ahead. But their immediate focus was shuttle systems for piloting.
Makes sense. And they also got assigned a specific flight phase. Rendezvous in this case, which was seen as good prep for future station or satellite missions.
It's all about building that experience base. And speaking of experience, they got to interact with some legends.
Yeah, seeing John Young still around, still fit, and then John Glenn being assigned to a shuttle flight. That must have been incredible to witness.
Totally. And those little stories about Glenn?
Yeah.
With the author's 4-year-old daughter, Samantha, macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, very humanizing moments. And Samantha later understanding that John Young's work was walking on the moon. Adorable.
And then inheriting John Glenn's parking space after his flight in '98. That's pretty cool. Little piece of history.
It is. The account also touches on family life, adjusting to Houston. Leslie, the author's spouse, getting involved, leading the spouses group. That support network is crucial.
Absolutely vital, I'd imagine. Okay, so training continues. Then comes the STA, Shuttle Training Aircraft.
Right, that modified Gulfstream jet basically mimics how the shuttle handles during landing, which is like a flying brick, famously.
So lots of practice landings out at White Sands.
Constantly, because you only get one shot at landing the real thing. No go-arounds.
High stakes. And then the flight assignment. STS-103. Hubble repair. How did they find out?
Apparently very directly. Kurt Brown, the commander, just came up and told them, March 1999, said something like, you better have your stuff together because we're flying in 6 months.
Wow. Just like that.
Pretty much. And keep it secret except from family.
And then there was that joke meeting later.
Oh, yeah, with Charlie Precourt and Jean-Francois Clairvoy. They pretended the author was in trouble for some T-38 issue before revealing the actual STS-103 assignment. A bit of astronaut humor, maybe, to break the tension.
That's a bit intense.
Yeah.
And the crew. A mix of veterans, and the author is the only rookie.
That's right. Kurt Brown commanding, then Clairvoy, Don Grunsfeld, Mike Fall, Steve Smith, Claude Nicolier, all experienced except our source, who was the first American from that 96 SCAN class to fly.
And the mission. Emergency Hubble repairs. 4 spacewalks planned to fix failing gyroscopes.
Yeah, and you really can't overstate Hubble's importance. It just revolutionized astronomy, seeing the universe clearly without the atmosphere blurring everything.
It led to huge discoveries, right?
Yeah.
Expansion rate of the universe, its age, dark energy, dark matter, finding new planets.
All sorts. So fixing it was, well, a massive responsibility.
Yeah.
The stakes were incredibly high.
Which meant even more intense training specifically for this mission.
You bet. Endless simulator time. Working through really complex failures as a crew, how one problem affects everything else.
And that's where the story about the cooling system sim comes in again, right? The port moding incident.
Oh, yes. The rookie, our author, accidentally did something with the computer configuration while trying to help during a simulated cooling failure, not part of their assigned checklist.
And the commander reacted strongly.
Let's just say it was made very clear that you stick to your job and don't touch things outside your responsibility unless directed. Clear communication, strict procedures, absolutely vital.
It really highlights that need for absolute discipline and high reliability teams. Stick to the plan.
Exactly. Because one small, unauthorized action could potentially be disastrous. Okay, so training's done, they're ready to go, then the delays start.
Right. STS-103 was supposed to follow Eileen Collins' Columbia mission.
But Columbia had that electrical short. And then they found wiring issues across the whole shuttle fleet. Major delays for 103.
Must have been incredibly frustrating. Training complete, mentally prep done. Wait. And wait some more.
Yeah, the launch date kept slipping. October, then November 19th, December 2nd, December 6th. You're constantly adjusting, mentally reprepping.
And they finally go into quarantine.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Sparse living, apparently. Adjusted sleep schedule for a night launch. Lots of reviewing checklists, handling the actual flight gear, signing stacks of photos. Standard pre-flight isolation.
But the delays continued in quarantine.
Oh, yeah. December 6th slipped to the 11th, then the 16th. Imagine the frustration building.
And then they scrub on the 16th.
Yep, potential issue with a weld on the external tank, pushed to the 17th.
Get suited up on the 17th.
Suited up, start tanking the shuttle, then scrubbed for weather.
Oof. And another scrub on the 18th.
It didn't even suit up that time. By then, they'd been in quarantine for 22 days. Think about all the family and friends who'd traveled, rearranged plans multiple times.
What a nightmare. And then the whole Y2K thing comes up.
Right. There were concerns inside NASA about launching so close to the year 2000 rollover. Potential issues with ground support systems, especially at the emergency landing sites like Edwards Air Force Base.
So they decided to postpone till the new year.
Initially, yes. The crew had mixed reactions. Our rookie was disappointed, naturally. Others were maybe a bit relieved to get out of quarantine for the holidays.
But then they changed their minds again.
They did. Decision reversed. Launch attempt set for December 19th.
Unbelievable roller coaster.
Yeah.
So December 19th, 1999. Launch day, finally.
Weather's still iffy. 60% chance of being go, but the countdown proceeds.
The ride out to the pad in the Astrovan must have felt different this time.
Yeah, described as kind of eerie, empty, because everyone's cleared out for fueling. Then up the tower, 195 feet. There was even a little snowball fight with ice condensation scraped off the pipes.
A moment of levity before getting serious. Strapping into the orbiter. That reclined position sounds really uncomfortable.
It is, especially for hours. And the pilot, our author, has critical jobs right then. Configuring systems, double-checking everything against the checklists. Intense focus.
Then the T-minus 9-minute hold. Time to think.
And the account mentions reflecting on the risk, comparing it to D-Day infantry. Just the stark reality of what they're about to do.
Powerful comparison. And then the final count. Ignition.
Main engines first, that deep rumble. Then the solid rocket boosters, SRBs, ignite. And it's just violence, noise, vibration, thrown back in your seat.
You're just along for the ride at that point, right? During the SRB burn.
Pretty much. 2 minutes of intense Gs. Then the SRBs separate, and it gets smoother riding on the main engines. You pass negative return, the point where you can no longer return to the launch site if something goes wrong.
A big milestone.
Huge. Reduces the most dangerous abort scenarios. G-forces build up again. Engines throttle back to limit stress on the vehicle, all the while monitoring systems. Then finally, main engine cutoff. Mako.
Silence.
Relative silence, yeah. And you see the external tank fall away, and then the first orbital sunrise.
What's that like, according to the...
Profound.
Yeah.
Breathtaking. Seeing that thin blue line of atmosphere, the curve of the Earth, the colors, orange, blue, unforgettable.
And weightlessness kicks in.
Instantly. Floating up to the middeck, seeing other crew members maybe starting to feel space adaptation syndrome, space sickness. You're really in space now.
And the job's just beginning. Rendezvous with Hubble, higher orbit than usual.
Yeah, higher than most satellites, which actually increases the risk during rendezvous, less room for error, more complex orbital mechanics.
So how do they manage that division of labor?
Commander Kurt Brown was at the aft flight deck controls doing the hands-on flying. Our pilot was managing the checklists, computer inputs, calculating the remaining rocket burns needed. Teamwork.
Plus supporting the spacewalk teams and the robot arm operator.
Right. And there's mention of the camaraderie with Jean-Francois Clairvoy, Billy Bob, getting tips on just living in space, how to move, how to eat, how to work efficiently.
Even pranks, apparently. Hidden underwear.
Chuckles. Yeah, seems like a bit of humor helped cope with living in tight quarters with 6 other people.
But working in space.
Yeah.
It's not easy, is it? Even with all the training.
No. The account mentions space brain difficulty concentrating even on familiar tasks. Maybe it's the novelty, the view, the physiological changes.
Everything takes longer too, right? Because things float away.
Exactly. And the fluid shifts, feeling puffy-faced. Simple tasks become more deliberate. Opening the payload bay doors right after orbit for cooling, deploying the arm, the antenna, even using the toilet requires real focus.
You can't just drift off mid-task.
Definitely not. But the core work, the spacewalks, went well. Replace the gyros, the main computer, a guidance sensor. They did cancel the fourth spacewalk, though,
Why was that?
to make sure they got back before Y2K, just to be absolutely safe. Mission accomplished on the critical repairs.
And that meant they were in orbit for Christmas.
Yeah.
First and last shuttle crew to do that.
Which led to that interesting Christmas message from the commander.
The very formal one.
Yeah, carefully worded. No overt religious references, maybe mindful of the Apollo 8 controversy years earlier. Just a message of peace and goodwill.
Followed by awkward silence.
Apparently. Until the Capcom back in Houston just abruptly told the pilot to go deal with the toilet compactor.
Laughs from the sublime to the ridiculous. The reality of space housekeeping.
Pretty much sums it up. But they did have a special Christmas dinner, gourmet French food brought by Clairvoy, eating on the middeck, watching the Earth go by. That must have been special.
Truly unique. Okay, mission done. Time to come home. Any more pranks?
Well, the pilot got Billy Bob back by hiding his long underwear needed for re-entry. A little return fire.
All in good fun, I hope. Re-entry itself, intense heat.
Absolutely. You're totally reliant on those thermal tiles doing their job. You see the glow outside.
Then the deorbit burn happens, you start coming down. Low over Baja California, apparently.
Felt low anyway. And they had an issue during re-entry. One of the air data probes failed.
How do they handle that? Panic.
Nope. Training kicked in. They knew the procedures, worked the problem as a crew, landed safely.
But the landing itself, still nail-biting. That no-go-around thing.
Always. Pilots monitoring systems, calling out speeds, altitudes, deploys the drag chute. Then there was an alarm during the rollout, potential blown tire.
What do you do then?
Focus on stopping safely on the runway. Worry about the tire later, which they did. Successful landing at Kennedy Space Center.
And then back in gravity. That must feel weird.
Very. Dizziness, feeling incredibly heavy. Your body has to readjust pretty fast.
Followed by medical checks and a seafood restaurant. Hours later.
Yeah, pretty surreal. Back with family and friends, eating dinner, just hours after fiery re-entry. What a transition.
Back to Houston, finally feeling like a real astronaut. Mission accomplished.
It's an amazing culmination. Years of work, incredible experiences, immense challenges overcome. It really gives you a sense of what it takes.
So for you, the learner listening in, what we've tried to unpack here is just how much goes into this. It's not just the rocket science, which is obviously huge.
Right. It's the relentless learning, the skill mastery, the teamwork under pressure, the unexpected social stuff, the sheer complexity of the machine and the environment.
This account really highlights that dedication, how vital the team is, but also just the awe of it all, even with all the technical grit.
It does. Which leads to maybe a final thought for you to chew on. When you think about all that training, all the things that can go wrong in space, what part of it strikes you as the most challenging or maybe the most remarkable?
Or, thinking about that carefully worded Christmas message, how do people in these kinds of diverse, high-stakes jobs navigate sharing personal beliefs or deciding not to share them? Something to ponder.
Definitely. And if this dives into that initial astronaut experience got you curious, there's so much more out there.
Yeah, look into the shuttle program's history, Hubble's ongoing discoveries, maybe read accounts from other astronauts.